Well, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on this lovely Thursday afternoon. I'm pleased to say that we've got some good news on the horizon, and fingers crossed by, where are we, the 21st of June, life will get back to some normality.
We can only hope, can't we?
I'm pleased to say, though, that we have been incredibly busy over certainly the last 4 months and before then with valuations, as they become so much more important and needed for clients as we see so much underinsurance. But I was going to say, we've got some stories for you today that's coming from both Alastair and I, and also the team, on some of the discoveries that we do when we go into clients' homes. Not everybody is always aware of what we're going out to see. Often clients have no idea what the value of goods are, and it's always nice to tell them that little excitement that it is what it is, or even the history that comes along with items, with age, provenance, and things like that. So as part of our webinars, this is the third in the second series that we've been doing. Fourth, actually. Fourth. Oh, it's, yes, of course, it's the end of February. As we go forward, we will be continuing, hopefully, through March, doing these. And again, if there's any subjects you'd like us to cover, please do let us know. We love your feedback. It's great to hear. They're certainly at the moment, coloured gems are going up in value, and we're seeing sort of why that is happening. And our jewellery specialist, Annabelle, will be writing a forthcoming article over the spring on coloured gems as we go into spring and summer. But yeah, we can cover any areas that you like, and always happy to. So, Alastair, I know I've got an exciting little story to tell on this discovery. I will go back to, I was in probably my mid-20s, and I was working for an auction house at the time, and the valuer said to me, well, you better, I worked in the accounts department, so valuations weren't really something that I came across, but obviously working for an auction house, you needed to be aware of what was going on. So as a young 20-year-old, I was grabbed with the director at the time and whisked into his car, and off we went to visit a client. And with probably huge open eyes as I was going in, the director at the time was, oh gosh, he must, I was going to say he must have been in his 50s, and at the time that was probably quite old, and I shouldn't really say that.
Glass houses, Rachel, glass houses.
Exactly, I was going to say, as someone is turning 50 tomorrow. So, but he sort of had this stature and this attitude, and off we sort of bound into a client's home who showed him a painting, who she was obviously incredibly proud of this painting that she had, and it was a treasured possession. But unfortunately, she needed to find something that she could sell because she was in need of funds. So of course our specialist at the time told her it wasn't what she thought it was, and then proceeded to sort of tell her that it wasn't very good at all, which obviously wasn't the news that she wanted to hear. But we got the story behind it, and we also learned a little bit about her. And lo and behold, she explained that in her earlier years she'd done traveling with her husband, and they bought things along the way. So we had various trinkets that appeared out of the cabinets, but it wasn't anything that was in the house, or partly in the house, that was worth anything. On our way in, Bob, who was the specialist, had spotted a umbrella stand that was in an open porchway, open to the elements, and anybody, the postman or the milk boy, anybody could have taken it. And he explained to her that it was Chinese and what dynasty it was, and how it was lovely. It hadn't actually had any damage to it at all, which, considering it was sitting on a step, was a miracle. And umbrellas and stick stands and walking sticks had been thrown into it over the years, but it was in perfectly good condition. And when he said to her that it was probably worth somewhere between £6,000 and £8,000, she was delighted. And this is at a time when the Chinese market isn't what it is today. But obviously it was quality, it was a good piece. And by the time it was sold at auction, I think she got somewhere around about £12,000. So she was delighted. And that was sort of the start of my experiences.
That's a great tale. I'll regale you with one of mine briefly before we start looking at some of our specialists who are far more impressive than either of you or I, am afraid, Rachel. But it's one of those things, isn't it? But I remember it was quite a few years now, and I was consulting for a very, very good regional auction house, and they had a call to a property out in the middle of Wales. And when I say the middle of Wales, I think it was about 2 hours from actually coming off a proper road before I actually got anywhere near the property. And so we turned up, and we knew a little bit about the property before we got there, because somebody had done a pre-inspection of the property, which is vital in this kind of scenario. And unfortunately, the people that had lived there were basically hoarders. And unfortunately, one of them had died. And at this stage, they were living in what was probably a 15-room house, a good 8 or 9 bedroom house, very large place. And all of the rooms in the entire property were full with rubbish. And when I say rubbish, you could look at one room and there was food wrappers from the 1950s, and it's no exaggeration. There was stuff there that you just couldn't believe was there. And I remember walking around seeing cans of Lucozade and cans of Coke or something that I remember from the 80s and things like that, and you're thinking, gosh, how on earth did they manage to survive? But they just didn't throw anything out, and it was awful. It was terrible. There wasn't a floor there anymore. The tiles had all come up, and it was literally they were living on a dirt floor. Anyway, lots and lots of work later, we realized, the cost of actually doing the job and actually clearing the property and getting everything out of it of value is going to be absolutely astronomical. And literally, I think it was about 3 or 4 days before we got towards the end of the job, and we managed to get to a wall. And this wall obviously had been, covered by bits of furniture and sofas that were up on their end. And on that wall was a 6 foot by 3 foot Joshua Reynolds painting. And I spotted the bottom corner of it before I saw anything else. And I thought that looks interesting. And it took about 2 or 3 days before they could move everything out of the way of the picture so I could actually see what it was. So for those 2 or 3 days, I was going back in and just kind of standing and trying to, it was almost, I thought, what's that program where you see a little section of the screen before you actually see what it is? And so I was seeing these little sections of this picture day by day, still trying to work out what it was. And it wasn't until about 3 days later where I actually saw the entire picture, and it was just stunning. I mean, it obviously needed a pretty good clean, unfortunately, but it was absolutely phenomenal. It came out and it made 98 grand plus the commission.
Oh, wow.
So ultimately it paid for quite a lot. And
of course this couple had it, and did they realize what it was?
I think they knew. They were fairly savvy, but I think they had just, over the years, unfortunately, towards the end of their lives, I'm fairly sure that unfortunately they got to that point where it didn't really matter that much anymore, and it was just there. So but it was tremendous, and I still can picture the boys, unfortunately all in hazmat suits, taking it out of the building. And it was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And it was a very, and there are a few other things in the property as well that were tremendous, but that was the thing that really stood out as the kind of thing that you see, and it kind of just kind of really brought it home that people have these things and they're still out there and they still don't know the value of them.
Well, I know we're going to talk a little bit later on about a valuation that we've been involved in over the last couple of months that again has had some excitements to it. But should we listen to Dave or one of the others?
Yes, let's have a look at David.
We'll share with you.
Yes, let's bring up David because it's a lovely story from David, as expected.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Dave Dallas, Old Master and Early British Picture Specialist at Doerr Dallas Valuations, and I have a particular love and expertise for British landscape painting between 1650 and 1850. And of all the discoveries I've made over a very long career, the one I'm about to show you is one of my favourites. About 20 years ago, I was wandering around a London auction house and I noticed a small painting about 2 feet high and 20 inches wide, hanging only just above the floor, a long way down. A disadvantageous place to hang a painting. Anyway, picked it up and had a better look at it, and I knew immediately where it was. It was Flatford Lock with Stratford St Mary Church on one side and Dedham on the other, and water meadows in between. It had 2 little children fishing. I recognised them too because the little girl in her pink and blue dress occurs in a later painting called Stratford Mill that John Constable painted in 1820. And here she was fishing over the parapet of the lock. Well, it had the most hideous sky, pink and squirrely, and I thought, that really is dreadful. I wonder what it's disguising. It must be so damaged that somebody's totally repainted the sky. Anyway, I took it home and I had it there for about 14 years, and then curiosity got the better of me and I decided to see what was underneath the overpaint. Well, surprisingly, there were just 2 small holes in a rather grey, rainy sky, but whoever had restored it had painted the whole sky to blend in the 2 little damages that needed repairing. I showed it to Annie Lyles, who agreed that it was Constable of about 1814. It went to the big show at the Tate of the great landscapes, and whilst it was on view there, a collector of Constable wanted to buy it, flew over to London to have a look actually just prior to the exhibition, and bought it, and I'd managed to turn £1,200 into 5.15 million. So John Constable's been very kind to me over the years.
Right, well, that blows us out of the water a little bit, really, doesn't it, Rachel? Slightly, you know. But if it was going to be anyone, it would be David. So.
Well, I was going to say, David is a leading authority on Constable. So obviously that started when he said he'd had it for 40 years, obviously that was a long life sort of passion.
I think it might have been 14 years that he said that he actually had it for. I think he bought it. And
okay.
I must admit I have heard this story because I've seen the painting, but it's a tremendous story. But it goes to show, when you are a specialist and when you know somebody so intrinsically as David does with Constable, and I've shown David things that have been attributed as Constables by certain authorities, and David has just pulled them apart because of the knowledge that he had. I mean, you can hear from the way that he describes the certain landmarks and the girls in the certain dress and what they're doing. I think he could possibly tell you what John Constable had for lunch in January of 1816 if he really wanted to. It really is that kind of level of knowledge, and it always impresses me. So it's unsurprising that if anyone was going to find a hidden Constable, it would be David.
I was going to say, their passion just comes through, doesn't it, when they talk? So, well, come on then, let's listen to Jenny. Let's hear what Jenny has to say.
Okay.
Good morning, my name's Jenny Knott and I'm one of the silver and jewellery specialists. I think anybody that deals with jewellery will be able to tell you a tale of having unearthed something special from an old quality street tin, or one of my favourites is a Huntley and Palmer biscuit tin. I found Art Deco diamond earrings. In a very down at heel biscuit box I found a beautiful sapphire and diamond Victorian crescent brooch. But what I wanted to talk about today was silver. That's slightly more unusual, partly because if you have a piece of silver, you're likely to think it might have value. But my find was some 25 years ago, I should think, when I was on holiday in Devon with my parents and I went into an antiques shop, as it was my habit. It's not surprising that a lot of us will have spent our childhoods peering into antique shops, which piqued our interest in this whole profession. Anyway, I went into this antique shop where there were a pair of basting spoons, sometimes called stuffing spoons. They're basically over-large tablespoons. We use them in our house because we're greedy and we don't find that an ordinary tablespoon gives us nearly enough food. And so I have a fondness for stuffing spoons or basting spoons, and I picked this pair up and the marks were rather unusual. And I asked the owner of the shop what he thought, and he was a little bit vague. But I thought I recognised them as something a bit special, and I bought them for more money than I was probably comfortable to part with, but about the right amount of money for a pair of George III basting spoons. And when I got home and investigated, they were, as I had thought, a pair of basting spoons with a York hallmark. Now, nowadays, hallmarks are done in London, Sheffield, Birmingham, in Scotland, in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and in Dublin. So we have just a few centres because it's easy to travel and people can travel to get their items hallmarked or assayed, assay being the French word for to test. But back in the day, many centuries ago, it wasn't easy to travel, so there were far more hallmarking offices all over the country. And one of those was York. And provincial silver is very sought after, fairly rare in some cases. And I thought I had a bit of a find, and I was pretty pleased with that. I wasn't nearly as pleased, however, as I was when I found in a London auction house the matching pair of York basting spoons, which had the same maker but were a year apart. And I accidentally came across these about 6 months after having bought the first pair of basting spoons. Now, I know that this is the point at which I now produce these beautiful basting spoons, which I've kept and treasured over all these years. But sadly, that isn't how the story ends, because I was desperate to go on holiday. So I then sold all 4 basting spoons as a match set to somebody in the Silver Vaults in London. And I saw them some weeks later at the Olympia Fine Art Fair for a good deal more than he'd paid me. But I was extremely happy because I had my find and I was going on holiday. The moral of this really, so far as identifying your silver and being very aware of things that might need special insurance, is that although silver marks, many hallmarks are easy to read, it's just a case of decoding the marks on them. Some marks need further investigation. Sometimes marks are spurious. Sometimes there are marks on silver plate that look as if they're silver hallmarks, and they are arguably designed to deceive. And the ones that are of particular interest are these rare English provincial marks, Scottish provincial marks, also very rare, and also, which sort of comes loosely under the title, Chinese export and Indian export silver had marks on them that looked very much like English hallmarks. They were, again, arguably designed to deceive, but they all need investigation. So my find was a lucky find for me, but it does highlight the importance of having somebody look at any mark that you think on a piece of silver or silver plate. It might well be plate, but it's always worth finding out what the marks are, because some of these marks will lead you to some really rare treasure.
Wow.
Fascinating again. It's really interesting, actually, that Jenny brought up regional hallmarks. So obviously, in your time in Chester, no doubt you saw a lot of Chester hallmarks and Newcastle ones, which are again two of the most uncommon ones that you see. And it does bring such a premium when you find those kind of items with rare hallmarks, as opposed to, I hate to say, the run-of-the-mill Sheffield, Birmingham, London, etc. And some of those rarer ones are interesting. But I have to say, I've never sold anything to go on holiday. Have you, Rachel?
No.
I find that quite sad. But alas,
I was going to say, it's one of those ones that, again, for our audience, sometimes what is said out in the news or on television is not always correct. Throughout, you will hear brown furniture isn't worth anything, and that's not necessarily the case. Yes, the market has declined, but if you have quality pieces and they're special, then they can still make huge amounts of money. So clients really do need to have their items looked at on a regular basis. You know, don't just let these valuations sort of go on for, 15, 20 years. And even when you're having them done, I mean, interestingly, this week I had a call from a client who wanted just one diamond ring valuing, but we had previously valued 34 items for her. So when I said to her, well, why aren't you having it all done? She said, well, my insurance company only wants the one item. So I said, well, can you go back to your insurance company and just confirm that they would cover the loss in value from 3 years ago to today? So anyway, she did, and the answer was no. And she agreed that she should get all of her jewellery revalued, which we're in the process of doing. But I did get James, who's one of our jewellery specialists, to give me just 2 items out of the 34 that we could say to her, this is why we're telling you to value it all. And there was a watch that there was potentially a £40,000 differential from 3 years ago to today. So, large sum, 34 items in total. This is just one. And we also had a necklace where there was a £17,000 difference from 3 years ago to today. So it's so important. And again, silver also needs to be looked at. It isn't as fashionable because people don't want to clean it. But if you own silver, again, you need to be aware of values. And I think Jenny's comment just about 2 spoons or 4 spoons, you've got to keep your eyes on any of your assets that you own. Right, who's next?
Right, so I think we'll go with my very good friend Jonathan next, who always is a fantastic raconteur, and he has a lovely story here.
Hi there. My name is Jonathan Horwich. I'm an art specialist for Doerr Dallas. And I just think I want to tell you about a favourite moment. I spent my entire working life in the art world. Some things stand out, some things probably I've long since forgotten, but there are just moments where somehow everything comes together. And this is a story about the most wonderful masterpiece by John William Waterhouse, one of the late pre-Raphaelites, and a picture he made and exhibited at the Royal Academy in 1895 called Saint Cecilia. And the moment begins with our visit. At the time I was working at Christie's, heading up the British Art Department, and we were working on an evening sale. And sometimes when you're working on an auction, you want something that anchors the sale. We hadn't found that. We were out together, myself and my good colleague Martin, looking at a client's collection. We went round the house on the ground floor. We knew the collection to some extent, but there were always, and still are, wonderfully, surprises. We work up to the first floor into not the main bedroom, but a guest bedroom, and there sitting on the wall is this just completely breathtaking masterpiece by John William Waterhouse, St. Cecilia, just to the right of the dressing table. And it stopped us in our tracks. We couldn't really believe what we were looking at. So here, in a nanosecond, was our star lot and a masterpiece. And we scuttled off downstairs to ask the owner what the situation was with the picture. He very calmly told us that, oh yes, I know the one. It's on offer at the moment. And we thought, well, that's quite a smart thing to do. And indeed, it is a masterpiece. It was on offer at 2.5 million to someone through an agent. And we said, how long is the offer to run? And he said, I think they've got another 2 weeks. And there and then we thought, we must have this, but we couldn't have it until the 2 weeks offer was up, and when that had lapsed, then we could make our pitch. And so it became the longest 2 weeks in my career, where we're just hoping day after day that whoever has an option on this doesn't pick it up. Bear in mind, it was 2.5 million, I think it was, or maybe 2.3. So it's a lot of money to stump up. And sometimes when people are offered something in what we call cold blood, they take a long time and sometimes don't always choose wisely. So maybe we thought that's what was going to happen. And sure, after 2 weeks of nail biting, we finally got the call to say, actually, the person who wanted it reserved for them has now let the offer lapse, and you're free to have a go, boys. And we couldn't believe our good fortune and made it a key element of our 2000, June evening sale of important British art. And it was just a blast. We had to work around the offer price of 2.5 million, and our estimate prior to sale is 2.5 to 3.5 million. By far and away a record estimate, never mind a record price for Waterhouse. But you just couldn't take your eyes off it. And at the time, there was what you might call a golden moment. There was a very active and very wealthy client in America, an American client based in New Jersey. There were 3 other collectors of pure Victorian art, which this is just a prime example. And St. Cecilia is the patron saint of music. Sometimes in our lives in the art world, we're thinking not only how wonderful the picture is, but who is going to buy it. And slowly but surely we put 2 and 2 together. The evening sale came, and our chairman, Lord Hindlip, Charlie Alsop, as he was then, more famous now for being Kirsty Alsop's father than anything else. But Charlie took the sale, and we came up to offer St. Cecilia, and the bidding began slowly, and one particular bidder was pacing up and down the aisle, very unusual for an auction where most people are seated and concentrating. But he was coming in and out of the room, I guess in a state of flux as to whether he was going to bid for it or how strongly he was going to bid for it or whatever. But either way, somehow that added to the drama. And bidding began at just under 2 million and carried on and on and on and on. And in the end, this picture made £7 million and is now a significant part of the, maybe I'll give you 2 seconds to guess who bought it, the Lord Lloyd Webber collection. And who else would buy that? A man whose taste and collection of Victorian art is second to none. In fact, probably is the best in the world. And of course, St. Cecilia is the patron saint of music. We went on to see the picture again when it was shown at the Royal Academy in a year when, you might remember, the Russian government was sending an exhibition of its collection to the Royal Academy, but then couldn't offer certainty that pieces would not be returned to them. So there was a big gap in 1 September, October, the Royal Academy filled by Lord Lloyd Webber's collection, and there we saw it again, the most magnificent thing. You know, I guess this is a rarefied picture at £7 million, but I can still remember it was this time of year, February 2000, standing in front of this masterpiece by John William Waterhouse and almost being unable to move. We traced it back to its first sale. It was first bought by an Australian collector in 1895 and then subsequently appeared in a sale at Sotheby's in Belgravia in 1978, where it was withdrawn and was sold prior to the sale and then reappeared when we saw it in 2000. So all in these sort of little blocks of time. But I love that picture and will never forget that golden moment, which is what makes doing what we do fun. So visiting people at home, there's always going to be surprises, and John William Waterhouse, St Cecilia, is certainly mine. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that. It's not too... there's a fantastically happy ending to it all. So I hope to see you all again when we're out visiting clients in the very near future. Bye-bye.
And as always, Jonathan being particularly fantastic with a brilliant story. Again, it goes to show when you see these kind of items on a day-to-day basis and your knowledge is that good, obviously his initial thought was completely correct of how much of a masterpiece it was, and obviously went on to be a big part in somebody's collection.
Hilary, sorry if you're struggling to hear that last video. I'm not quite sure why not.
I think, yes, I think Jonathan unfortunately was quite quiet. It was set correctly on Zoom, but unfortunately he was quite quiet through that. So I do apologize if you didn't hear that.
Super. I'll see if we can send you just a clipping of him so that you can catch it again if you were struggling. And hopefully everybody else could hear that. And then we've got one more from Annabelle.
Let's have a look at Annabelle's one that she kindly sent over.
Hi there, my name's Annabelle and I'm a jewellery specialist at Doerr Valuations. My favourite recent find is a beautiful brooch by Georges Fouquet. He was a Parisian master at the turn of the 20th century, and I don't see many pieces of his come up at all, although they do come up sporadically at auction. This particular piece arrived to me in a box of bits that was destined to go to a charity shop. Yes, really. So we went through the box, and to have a look if there was anything that we needed to save before it went, and right at the bottom of the box was this beautiful starburst brooch in turquoise, diamonds and 18-karat yellow gold. Quite a surprise. We have decided to actually have it authenticated, which is happening at the moment. And if it is authenticated and it goes to auction, we feel it may reach around £6,000, which isn't bad for a box just ready to go off to the charity shop.
It goes to show, though, Rachel, I think that with a lot of people, especially with jewellery, and where people have, accumulated collections over the years, whether they've inherited bits or not, that things can get overlooked. And I think it's a really important fact that when you have a jewellery collection, that it is constantly praised. Because, again, similar with paintings, things are people gain interest in things again after a number of years. Something may be unfashionable, but then in 20 years' time after that, when it was unfashionable before, it suddenly becomes popular again. Look at Urquhart and G-Plan furniture, for example. 20 years ago, we were throwing it on skips, and nowadays you go down the King's Road and people are selling them for lots of money. So it goes to show fashion is such an important part of things, and possibly why that brooch may have been overlooked.
I think that's very true, though, because if you look, I look at my mum's jewellery, and unfortunately there's nothing in there that maybe I would want. But that's not to say that the stones within the pieces are valuable and you can have them reworked. So you can redesign jewellery. If you find that within your own jewellery box you've got valuable and good stones, but which will again be expensive, but you dismiss it because you don't like the look of it. And I think often that can be the case. And it's that we see it so much in what we do, that fashion can often dictate and yes, it will have an effect on the value, but obviously if in jewellery you've got good stones, they will always be good stones. And as I said, over antique furniture, quality is always there, and that's what you need to look out for.
Definitely, definitely. But coming back to what we were talking about with interesting finds, I think one item that I think just completely ignores fashion and has a constant source of whether it be collectability or value is coins. And in recent times, we've been dealing with quite a large property and a collection of items from there, which has been absolutely astronomical. I went into the property initially last year and had a good look round, and if I'm being totally honest, there was a nice collection of items, and I thought, okay, you know, there's some good bits here, and it's going to take our team of specialists a reasonable amount of time to go through it all and obviously check it. In the interim, with me going there initially and then actually coming back, they had found, and this is no exaggeration, over 1,000 gold coins hidden throughout the house.
I think we need to explain that it was a deceased estate,
yes,
and we were being called in to help the executors. A gentleman who was in his 90s had obviously died, but over a period of 40, 50 years had collected, unmarried, if I'm right.
Yes, from what I'm aware.
Yeah, unmarried. So his he'd bought things and he had passion, but he was also of an age that possibly he didn't trust the banks. So I think you know, putting it under the bed or stuffing it somewhere was literally what we found.
And when you say stuffing it somewhere, we're talking in flower pots, under, it sounds ridiculous, but under floorboards, literally in cans in the kitchen, you name it, there was stuff there. There was stuff buried in the garden. It was absolutely everywhere. And within that collection, possibly some of the finest gold coins I've ever seen, gold coins and medallions, some of the rarest pieces that I've seen, certainly. And I'm still working it on at the moment, but we're looking at certainly over £1 million worth of items within the entire collection.
Yes, I was going to say, and that's possibly more as the collection comes to light.
As it unfolds, because there are more things that they keep finding, which is strange. But as you say, but this is the type of job where we thrive, because ultimately, and no disrespect to the people as the executors, unfortunately their knowledge on these things is so limited that they really don't know what they're throwing out or what they're keeping. And so my advice to them when I went to see them last year was, do not touch anything and do not start throwing anything out until we've seen what's there. And thankfully, gosh, it was, yeah.
Well, how many times have we heard the story, you know, usually from the Antiques Roadshow, where somebody's found something in a skip or whatever, and again, it's dismissed, it's thrown out. I must say, you don't think you're going to come across these houses today, as things changed, but yeah, it was. And from our point of view as valuers, it's one, ensuring you're giving the client the best advice, but also saying to them, you know, if you don't understand the value, how can you decide as an entity what you're going to do with the collection? And I think that was, for me, the scariest part of it, because I know that he was looking to empty the property and potentially put it into storage. And we do know that storage companies in the past have gone up in smoke. If that was the case, what would the level of insurance be? Would the client's belongings be paid out correctly? It's like with jewellery valuations. I probably am the most untrustworthy person ever, and you know, I always act on the air of caution. And it's like with clients with jewellery valuations, I always say, never leave your jewellery behind. And that unfortunately has come from one experience that I have. So it's not, don't think it's a regular thing, but I had a client that asked us to do a valuation of her jewellery, and lo and behold, she'd taken it 5 years previously into her jeweller's to have it valued. Unfortunately, the jeweller's no longer around, but she took it to the jeweller, she left her jewellery behind, and of course she had a diamond certificate, and when we got to value it, that diamond was not the diamond that was in the ring.
You do hear that a remarkable amount, though. It's strange. You do hear people swapping diamonds out.
And again, I've always said, if you're having your jewellery valued, always have it done at home and always have it in front of you. I'm always very cautious that, clients are aware what they're giving us, of what we're valuing, and that we are literally within their home and in front of them.
I think really, really big thing with going back to the coins and some of the items within there was my kind of, not frustration, but my argument with them was there is absolutely no point in insuring it for a figure that you do not know is correct, because you're effectively, what is the point? Because it may be worth 3 times that, but if you're insuring it for a figure that is just off the top of your head, it may, and then moving it from one place to another place for security, but still not knowing what you're actually insuring is ridiculous in my mind.
And I'm sure there are lots of people that put furniture in store every year that actually don't have a full detailed inventory of what's going in there, and probably sign a piece of paper and think, oh, it's all sorted. If you're ever, and again, even down to small things or not so valuable, always photograph them, so there is a record. Unfortunately, we cannot value items from photographs, certainly with jewelry, because obviously who's to say it's a diamond, but at least then there is a record of some sort. So always keep that information. Again, I tell clients to make sure they turn off their location on their images, especially on things like iPhones, because if they get into the wrong hands, of course, it leads you right to the house. People don't often think that way, but again, as I said, I'm the one that does. We have to be so careful. Our security is unbelievable here at Doerr Dallas Valuations, because we not only tell the burglar what it looks like and what the value is, but we tell you which room it's in as well. So no, I am paranoid beyond belief of client data, and we have the top level security and are very careful with clients' information. So yes, you just have to be have somebody that you can trust, that you can ask the question. I mean, we're always happy to have photographs sent to us, and then we can decide whether we need to go out and see the item, whether it's of value, and that's always a really good point. And it gives us a starting point with the client if they're unsure about continuing on. And just on that note, I had a broker send me 2 photographs of some paintings the other day with the comment, the client is looking to reduce down their insurance, and they believe that these 2 paintings aren't worth anything anymore. I think she had them both insured for 25,000 on her policy, and I sent them off to Dave. Dave had a look at them and proceeded to tell me that one of them was worth around about potentially 150, 200,000. One of the paintings was by a Canadian, and his auction prices were 100,000 and above. So
insurance of gosh, yes, wow.
And he's incredibly collectible in Canada. So yes, it wasn't necessarily a scene that she thought was exciting, but it was actually who it was by. And the other one that she had insured for around about 25,000, we actually said could probably come down a little bit, and probably about 20.
That's a good part of the story for her.
But yes, and you know what? I must chase up the broker because I don't know what the client said. I mean, I said, you know, we'd be delighted to do a full valuation for her, not just, you know, through an email. But yeah, I'm not quite sure whether we made her day or not. I don't think our premiums went down, put it that way. So, well, before we sign off, has anybody got any questions for us that they'd like to pop into the chat box? Please do. As you know, we are always on the end of a telephone or an email. I'm not quite sure what next week's webinar is on, Alastair.
Well, there's a couple of things that are coming up. I'm going to be chatting to Colin Fraser again fairly soon, because obviously last week there was a fantastic whiskey sale that actually happened, and one of the biggest whiskey sales that has been for many years. And Colin obviously is our whiskey specialist. And yes, I'll be chatting to him with a lot of interest, I imagine. It was one of our biggest webinars actually of last year, and a lot of people tuned in and really enjoyed it, so I'm looking forward to that one. And up in the works as well, obviously there's been a bit of a scandal in the news in the past few weeks about the Banksy that was on the wall of a Nottingham kind of suburban road that was taken down and removed by a dealer and now placed in a property. So I'll be chatting with Ben Hanley, our resident Banksy expert, just to discuss what that means and how things are different with Banksy's street work than they are with his works on paper that are all attributed. So that'll be.
I was going to say he doesn't say it's by him. So selling it, you've got no pest control certificate that obviously you would get with a piece of art. So yeah,
it's a bizarre industry, and as you say, never want to shy away from the limelight, but just not with himself. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see that. So yes.
And as ever, I was going to say, we are seeing some record results in auctions at the moment over all areas of the market, which is wonderful that people are buying during this pandemic. And I think that people do have potentially some surplus cash that they're looking to put into different areas. So again, if you are looking to invest, do ask us the question if it's a good idea or not a good idea, because unfortunately, again, we do see it at the other end when clients have paid too much, and some independent advice is always a good thing to do. So, well, thank you, Alastair, as ever, for joining me. We do have a question, so let me just ask. Do you have any advice for clients with substantial vinyl collections? Oh, well, Alastair, this is really up your street.
The vinyl market is as weird as it is, well, anything. I think it's as different as people's musical tastes are. It's like saying somebody likes cars. You know, there can be a car of one make and there can be a car of another make. With vinyl, it's exactly the same, whether it be classical music or whether it be rock and pop. Now, really good early stereo recordings, be it on people like Decca, EMI, PYE, those really early kind of vinyl recordings in stereo have seen record results in the last couple of years. People are really into that, and that's classical music. But also, again, it's rarities. It's, you know, you look at big names, but it's not big names of, you know, run-of-the-mill records. It's rarities. Bowie's a really good example. His earlier work makes good money, but some of the stuff that was, you know, mass produced doesn't. Really good example is somebody will come to me all the time and say, I've got a copy of the Beatles' first single, I Want to Hold Your Hand. It must be worth a load because it was their first single. I said, well, unfortunately, it was really popular, so it's not. And there were millions and millions and millions of them made. What you really want is rare limited pressings of the White Album that they only produced 40 of, because that's where it's at. It's the scarcity. And as artists, for example, come in and out of fashion. So, for example, when David Bowie very untimely and very unfortunately died, his earlier work that was very rare became incredibly valuable. So it's really a case of it that there is no overview, I hate to say it, on vinyl records, other than the the hype, shall we say, is true. And a lot of people are buying vinyl still. So I would say get it checked out. And again, condition is paramount. If you're going into a property and there's loads of things in plastic wrappers without decent dust sleeves on that are all scratched, nobody's going to want to buy them as investments. So the value of them obviously plummets. But good record collections that are kept in good conditions have been going up, every year for the last 10 years, I would say.
Is it worthwhile again putting together a listing and sending it over to us, and we can literally scan it if they put the group and then the album or whatever it is?
The key is there will be serial numbers on the records, and
Okay.
I'll get a bit technical here. So what you really want is for example, on a Beatles record, you will always see on the back there'll be 3 numbers and 3 letters, and that is basically the catalog number for the record. Now, that isn't just the only way of telling what the record is, because unfortunately there'll be different pressings of that record, and the only way of telling that is if you take the actual record out of its sleeve, the middle part of the record, there's a black area around it that's known as the run-out track, which is when the needle gets to the end of the record, it goes quickly, then it goes back to the start. Now, on that run-out track, there'll be another number that's etched, probably usually with a scribe, so it looks like it's hand marked. Later ones look like they're done with a typewriter, but that is the most important number, because that'll tell you what the pressing is, and that'll actually tell you when it was made. And so that's far more important than the name of the band and then the album title.
Okay.
Because there are so many different variations of these ones, and that will tell you which plant it was made at, which market. I mean, you've got to remember with Beatles records, there were 50, 60 different versions of every individual album with different covers, slightly different track listings. And
is there anywhere, Alastair, that you can that a client could go to get a list of the most expensive albums anywhere, or is it literally just sitting on the internet? And
it's unfortunately it's a bit of a trawl. I think you've got to know what you're looking for before you start looking for it. I think
so Anthony, the answer to your question is send us some details and Alastair can have a chat.
Yeah, that's probably for the best.
Excellent. Well, listen, thank you as always for joining us. It's been great fun and we've loved having you with us today. Alastair, thank you to you, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Cheerio, everyone. Nice to see you. Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.